Ladies and gentlemen, we are approaching our station at the entrance to Main Street, USA, gateway to the 7 theme lands of the Magic Kingdom. As you approach the entrance, please keep your party together and have your tickets ready.
Broadcasting live from 38 Studios in Providence, this is the Go Ask Mickey podcast, helping you with the tips, tricks, and the tools needed to save you time and money on your next Disney vacation. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, send them to goaskmickey@gmail.com.
This week on the Go Ask Mickey podcast, Florida residents discover Disney. The saddest trip in history will only take 3 hours. And we go in depth this week with Space Mountain. So pull up on the bar and hold on tight, because this is the Go Ask Mickey podcast. Welcome to the Go Ask Mickey podcast. My name is Jerry from goaskmickey.com. And being that we didn't win Powerball this week, it is back to work as usual. And if you're listening to the show, neither did you. So this week, we are discussing the in-depth look at the Space Mountain, the attraction. But before we get into all of that, let's see what's going on around the world.
Good evening. I'm Ron Burgundy, and this is what's happening in your world tonight.
All right, this is what's going on this week in the world. Florida residents discover Disney ticket returns for 2018. Though it isn't offered every year, Disney has announced that they will begin allowing Florida residents to purchase special Discover Disney tickets that offer deep discounts on regular theme park admission during a specific period. And though we assumed this deal would come back in 2018, it has now been confirmed that Florida residents with a valid state ID, such as a driver's license, can purchase the following multi-day ticket at some very lucrative prices. Now, they have a 3-day ticket available for $159, and that's $179 with a Park Hopper add-on for all 3 guests and older. So that's not bad. And then they have a 4-day ticket, $179. $199 with a Park Hopper add-on for all guests 3 and older. So for 3 and older, you're getting a 4-day ticket for $179. You add the Park Hopper, you're getting $200. That's not bad. That's $50 a day. This new ticket offers a huge savings over the traditional Magic Your Way ticket, which normally would cost $349 for 3 days with a Park Hopper for a regular guest, and $425 for 4 days with the Park Hopper, and is available for Florida residents to take advantage of until June 20th. That's a long, long time. These special deals, Discover Disney tickets, can be used any day between now and June 24th with no restrictions on time in between visits. Now, that is a great deal. If you're a Florida resident, I would definitely take advantage of this because it is well worth. You're saving tons of money if you don't already have an annual pass. All right, also this week, the Magical Express returns to pick up 3 hours before flight departure. Now, the saddest bus trip in all of history, the trip back to the airport via Disney Magical Express, begins picking up guests up to 4 hours before their flight departure, the flight departure time earlier this year, due to enhanced Transportation Security Administration. So the TSA bumped up their security measures and advised people at the Orlando International Airport to arrive 4 hours early. However, this change proved to be very unpopular, with many guests complaining that extra hour was spent simply waiting around at the airport as they could not check their baggage that long before their flight and had nothing to do during that extra time. Fortunately, thanks to guests' feedback, Disney rolled back this change and is now once again picking up guests who fly domestically 3 hours before their flight time. International departures continue to use the extended 4-hour window service. So enough people complained about it. and they got their way. They're back to 3 hours. So if you miss your flight, too bad. Okay, and finally, security changes happening at the Disney World hotels. Though it's not necessary, a perk per se, guests staying at a Walt Disney World hotel in the near future should know that Disney is taking yet another security measure that began last week that will see do not disturb signs replaced with room occupied signs that will notify cast members that guests are in the room. Though this might not sound like a big deal, these new signs indicate that cast members may enter the room at some point during a 24-hour period for any reason. Come on in, including those related to guest safety. This change is already in effect at the hotels surrounding the Magic Kingdom and will roll out to other locations in the coming days.
Housekeeping?
No, thank you. Sleeping.
Housekeeping?
Could you come back in an hour?
Housekeeping, you want towel?
More towels. Need sleepy.
Housekeeping, you want mint for pillow?
Please go away. Let me sleep for the love of God.
All right, that is it for the news this week. Not much going on, little things here and there. Mainly we wanted to talk about this week was the Space Mountain attraction. So we're going to come right back. We're going to take a quick break. We will come right back with the in-depth look at the Space Mountain the attraction right after this.
Something's wrong with you. Really.
All right, this week we wanted to talk to you about the Space Mountain the attraction and everything about it as far as the start to finish. How it was created, why it was created, and every detail that it needed to be created. So without further ado, let's get into the beginnings of the Space Mountain the attraction itself. Space Mountain is the alpha and the omega of the Disney roller coasters. Its legendary status is so significant that it's a pop culture reference virtually everyone understands. Perhaps no other theme park attraction in the history of the industry has a better recognition. How does the attraction pull off all the tricks that have made it such a theme park behemoth? Let's go behind the ride to find out what the dazzling secrets of the Space Mountain are. Now, the experience is an original indoor roller coaster, and the trick is an idea literally a decade in the making. Here are 3 facts about the design of Space Mountain. The Space Mountain debuted in 1975, so it's pretty old. Walt Disney was involved in planning of Space Mountain, and Walt Disney died in 1966, so that's how long it was of planning. The above reflects just how much planning was involved in the building of the world's first indoor roller coaster. Disney employees at WED Enterprises loved space travel, one of the most popular subjects of the 1950s and 60s, and their job duties occasionally allowed them to interact with the heavyweights of the field. Disney even aired science factual programming during the 1950s that used Wernher von Braun, the father of rocket science, as a technical advisor. Nobody cared more about getting the science of space travel right more than Walt Disney himself when his cohorts presented plans for a space travel simulator called Spaceport. Uncle Walt loved the idea. He financed concept art for the attraction and even argued for a critical component of its design. He fervently believed that Spaceport would only work as a dark ride, an indoor dark ride. Disney construction, an outdoor recognition of an outer space, wasn't ideal to Disney. He knew that sunlight and inclement weather were both factors that would disrupt the illusion of the interstellar travel. An indoor setting would provide a controlled environment, a better backdrop for the emptiness of outer space, and Imagineers could paint the walls and control the lighting, recreating the unforgettable imagery of mankind's first escape from its atmosphere. While Neil Armstrong's walk on the moon was still several years away, scientists already knew that the mechanics of orbital launch. Innovators such as Wernher von Braun could provide Disney with advice on building the most realistic spaceport. But there was just one problem. a steel roller coaster system that provides a satisfying bumpy ride. Now, the trick was the computer relay systems. Disneyland and Disney wasn't the place where Space Mountain debuted. Instead, it became the first truly new ride in the history of Magic Kingdom. Almost everything else there was a recognition or recreation of something already existing at Disneyland. The lone exception wasn't a ride, but instead an audio animatronic show. Country Bear Jamboree. Why did a ride Walt Disney worked on get delayed until 9 years after his death? Imagineers honed in on an emerging technology of the 1960s. At that time, business computers were literally as big as an office floor, and their processing power was inferior to a Commodore 64. Disney knew that they wanted computer controllers to pick up and choose the times when roller coaster carts were supposed to leave for departure area. They had a similar idea in place to the way that air traffic controllers worked at that time. Unfortunately, technology hadn't caught up with them yet, and the hardware required to build what they were now calling Space Mountain didn't even exist yet. Even if it had, Disney would have found the prices exorbitant and prohibitive. The company had no choice but to wait for computers to grow more powerful, and Walt Disney unfortunately didn't live long enough to see his dream of an indoor space travel come to fruition. In his absence, Walt Disney World became a reality, but Space Mountain wasn't one of the original rides. The attraction wouldn't open for another several years, and part of it was the economics of opening a new theme park. Most of it was the technology skill needed for an improvement. By 1972, Disney projected that they'd soon have the computing power needed to build an indoor, fully automated roller coaster. So they spent a couple of years building a mountain, one carefully measured so as to avoid outshining Cinderella's castle, and they waited for the strongest computer technology available. So, in 1974, Disney implemented a control system that decides when roller coaster carts leave the station as well as when they return. And the power of these computer sensors was so impressive for the 1970s that they could recognize when a cart was out of position and automatically shut down the ride. It was a hallmark achievement in the ride safety, and perhaps the first vision of the experimental prototype city of tomorrow that Uncle Walt had prophesized. Space Mountain took all the danger out of the ride system by removing cast members from the equation. Its computers track every moment all 30 carts in operation, guaranteed that collisions never occur. This might not sound like a huge deal today, but in 1975, it was just state-of-the-art technology. It was revolutionary theme park design that was years ahead of its time. Now, the interstellar travel in the span of 3 minutes and is a slow ride back to Earth. The genius of Space Mountain is its dizzying experience because the coaster cart hurls guests into the great unknown of outer space. They quickly lose a sense of ordinary Earth standards. The perception of Space Mountain is that it's frenzied, kinetic coaster that travels at intergalactic speeds, and the truth is shocking. The maximum velocity for the original version of Space Mountain at Magic Kingdom is 35 miles per hour. In execution, it travels even slower, going 28 miles per hour most of the time. For a perceptive Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, an attraction critics assail for its gentility, goes 34 miles per hour. Why does it feel so soft whereas Space Mountain seems so frantic? In execution, Space Mountain is a glorified experiment in sensory deprivation. The rider starts in a room of bright light pulsating as they count down to liftoff. Once the cart explodes into motion from its resting position, the rider is suddenly thrust into the empty darkness of space. They're like Sandra Bullock's character in Gravity, alone in the void of outer space. All known sensations of Earth and gravity fall away into the nothingness as the person becomes a space traveler for 100 50 feverish seconds. Disney Imagineers specifically chose this type of disruptive ride experience, and Space Mountain is supposed to mimic a traveler's return to Earth from a galaxy that may or may not be far away. Although this similarity is unintentional, since Star Wars was still 3 years away from reality when the attraction debuted, the trip back home is a bumpy ride, with the presumption that if air travel involves turbulence, intergalactic travel is rougher than a rugby scrum. The key is the setting. With a darkened interior in an indoor setting, Disney controlled all the lights. They can trigger a sensory response anytime they add a new sensation into the void of darkness. All sounds, flurries of lights, and whistling sensations of air snap the rider out of their empty isolation. In the classic science fiction vernacular, Disney controls the horizontal and the vertical. The person in the ride cart is completely at their mercy, making Space Mountain a controlled environment where the rider is wholly at the mercy of the track in front of them. It was a revolutionary design for the early 70s, and its underlying psychology continues to drive theme park innovation to this day. Disney's Space Mountain earned its reputation as one of the seminal theme park attractions of all time. Its impact is profound, and it offers a kick-ass ride experience most half a century later. So what do you think about that ride? You've ridden it, you've had it, you've done it. What do you think? Now, Disney's Space Mountain has continued and will always be one of the top rides in Magic Kingdom. It has gone on since 1975, and it's still one of the longest waited, most sought-after rides in the Magic Kingdom. Okay, so that is it for this week's in-depth look at the Space Mountain attraction. We'll be right back with closing of the show in 2 minutes and 2 seconds. Stick around.
That was awesome.
All right, that is it for this week's episode. The in-depth look at the Space Mountain attraction. There's so many different things about this ride that people love, and that is why we just decided this week to review it, go over it, and get an in-depth look at it. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you could, check us out on Facebook. Leave us any comments over there. And follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and check us out on the goaskmickey.com webpage. And if you could, give us a rate and review over at iTunes. And until next time, Disney Nation, rock on.
Head on over to goaskmickey.com or check us out on Facebook or leave us a review on iTunes.